So by now you guys pretty much know what we're doing. And today we're reviewing Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. So yeah, pretty much you guys know what to do by now. Expect some spoilers, expect me to give away the plot, to give away the characters, say my good stuff about it, say my bad stuff about it, and just in general give it the rating whether or not you should watch it. Now, right off the gate, I'm pretty much going to go ahead and be honest with you. I personally enjoyed it, but I don't know if certain people will. But, I highly doubt that's going to be that much of a problem. So, but maybe it is for some people, but for me, it's doable. So, sure, what is Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid about? Well, let's start with the actual plot. And it starts off in the same way that most great stories start off. Someone getting wasted out of their mind and waking up with a hangover that's pretty much like a hammer beaten to their skull senselessly. Yeah, basically, our main character, Kobayashi, I don't know if she has a first name, to be honest, pretty much wakes up. The next thing she knows is that she last night, during a drunken escapade, managed to save Toru, a dragon, pretty much certain death, and that now she wants to repay the favor in some way, shape, or form. In this case, she offers herself to be a maid, and of course, this does not sit well with this Kobayashi, considering the type of life she lives, where she's basically, I wouldn't say she's a shut-in or a loner, but more like, she has obligations that maybe could be hindered with having another mouth to feed. Obviously, I mean, it's pretty hard for me to take care of a dog, let alone try to pay some of the bills, which now that I think about it, I'm kind of procrastinating on those, and I really should start paying them as soon as I'm done with this. But who cares, whatever, it's like, it's Miss Kobayashi's Dragon. Alright, so then she decides, after a while, and after seeing how, she's really trying to adapt to the world, despite the fact that, she still doesn't really know certain things, or the few things that she does know are completely outdated. She's still, she manages to grow just enough to the point where she's bearable. And, well, they just start, living together. Now, right off the bat, Toru admits that what she is looking for with Kobayashi is a pretty obvious sexual relationship. However, Kobayashi, being the anime protagonist that she is not used to these kinds of things, or at least she's not used to people being that outright forward. Now, it's not revealed until later on, so I'm probably just giving away a couple of things that happen later. But just keeping that in mind, she's a lot more reserved, whereas Toru is a lot more open about it, and she's a lot more peppy and a lot more cheerful. Yappity. Anyways, it's not until later on that it is actually revealed that the Toru actually has a friend named Kana, who is a lot younger, and who they have spent significant time. Long story short, there are more dragons out there that apparently Kobayashi has no idea about, like an entire society. Who knows, maybe it's in another dimension. Maybe it's like in a different plane of existence. Like, I would not be able to describe it to you personally. Honestly, I think you have to watch the anime for yourself. But, yeah. Kana pretty much identifies as a pretty, petite little girl, despite being 1,000 years old. Basically because in dragon years, 1,000 years of age is still pretty young, therefore the young appearance. And at first she becomes a bit antagonistic of Kobayashi because she thinks that Kobayashi is what a brainwashed Toru, but in the end she ends up being open to, Toru living with Kobayashi, and even lives with her, even though, specifically, she ends up living with Miss Kobayashi as her daughter, which, now that I think about it, if you just suddenly adopt someone with little to no documentation, isn't she kind of an illegal? I mean, I guess Toru wouldn't really have that much of a problem, but considering how Kana does eventually end up going to school, you definitely need to start showing some paperwork out there. I don't know how the education system works over there, but I figured there's probably some kind of, I don't know, you'd probably have to show some form of documentation or identification. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just something as ideal as a Mexican. Maybe that's something I really have started to question a lot. And speaking of Mexicans, apparently we also have another Lucua, aka Quetzalcoatl, who was one of the main characters, as well as Fafnir, who are also friends of Toru, who are also dragons. So yeah, be expecting that. Now I'm going to start with Fafnir. Fafnir is pretty much your typical emo guy who basically is just edgy practically 24/7, whereas Lucua is pretty much, she's a lot more, how to say this, she's less reserved, but she probably should definitely be reserved. And although she does know a lot more about human history than Toru, and knows a lot more, she doesn't really know a lot about social interactions, and this will come in a different form. Like, I'll talk about that later. And yeah, pretty much that we see how they end up adapting to the Japanese society in this part of the world. And yeah, some of the results are either very heartwarming or very hilarious or very wrong. You'll see what I mean soon. And next we have Alma, who I've heard for some people actually really like this character, even though she didn't really get a lot of screen time. And basically, she also knows Toru, however, more as the antagonist to Toru, more as the, clashing enemies due to separate ideologies. Long story short, there are different types of factions in among Dragon Society, specifically a Chaos faction, a Harmony faction, and sort of a Bystander faction. Let's just say the differences between them are kind of the differences between, say, Republican, Democrat, and Libertarian. For those of you who are asking, I'm Libertarian. So, or at least I consider myself Libertarian. I'm more or less based right, I guess. That's probably the best way to think about it. Like, I'm more towards the center, but I guess I go to the right. I don't know. I shouldn't even be talking about politics. I don't even know what I'm going with. Now, let me tell you, it's pretty cheerful throughout most of the anime, but near the end, it gets, like, really dark really fast. But overall, I do recommend that you guys watch it. It really is a pretty interesting story, and honestly, it got nominated for... It's a pretty good anime for a reason. It's one of those animes that is watched by people. Now some of the cons, I'll start with one con. I guess would have to say the borderline pedophilia. Hang on 1 second. Hey sis, you there?
Yeah, I've been here for a while.
Where are you going right now?
Nowhere.
Okay, can you go nowhere to your room for a sec?
That's where I was going.
Okay, good. Just asking. Please don't come in here. Thank you. Love you. So, okay, now that that's out of the way, basically there's some borderline pedophilia. Now, as I mentioned before, Kana ends up going to school, and she ends up making a friend by the name of Riko. And in a way, it kind of goes into where it's like, on one hand, you could say that the sort of relationship they have, where Kana does mention that the type of relationship she wants with Riko is very similar to the one between Toru and Kobayashi. However, I think Kana wants to be more like Kobayashi, whereas she wants Riko to be more like Toru. And yeah, let's just say this thing kind of gets a little bit into where I almost question. It's like, I know Kana probably already has the mental maturity, but what about Riko? I mean, she's supposed to be like an 8-year-old, probably? It's like, in a way, it's kind of, let's just say it's kind of risque, but nothing is more risque than the following. Yeah, let's just say, also in the same school that Kana goes to is a kid named Shota, and really, can you really not come up with a better name than that? And who ends up, basically Lucua ends up posing as her older sister, and yeah, long story short, there's pedophilia in this, and I'm just like, This is definitely wrong. This is definitely wrong. I can't be the only one who's thinking this. I can't be. I can't be. However, so yeah, and that's really one thing. If you're okay with that, if you're like, this happens a lot in anime, and it does, and honestly, it's like I can kind of muddle my brain enough to the point where I can probably accept seeing this. But then there's another thing that kind of bothers me, and it's more to do with the dub. Now, don't get me wrong, the dub for this anime, the English dub, is actually pretty ingenious at points, but then there are moments where if you really are one of those people that gets really political about things, you'll kind of notice that the language kind of leans a little bit more towards the left. And very specifically, there is one line which Luqua says where she basically says how, where in the conversation between her and Toru, Toru mentions that she starts dressing up a little bit more, because typically she dresses up a little bit, exposing her assets, sort of say. And, okay, you pretty much know what I'm talking about. And, well, she ends up covering up a little bit more, and Toru asks what's with the sudden change in wardrobe. And the original dubs, the original says that a lot of people started saying that she should cover up more, and she did. However, in the English dubbing, she says that patriarchal societal demands were getting her ticked off, and that she changed clothes because of that reason. And, okay, two things. One, if you're going to suddenly add in terms like that, add in terms that honestly, you know, that won't really impact the feel of the show, or at least won't impact the character as much. Luqua is sort of she's definitely smart, but she's not socially smart in that sense. So she wouldn't really know that people are telling her to cover her up because of societal demand. She would just think that it's more of a fashion suggestion, if at all. And second off, patriarchal societal demands? Considering how women are really the people asking her to cover up, it would be more of a matriarchal societal demand. And yeah, it seems like women are getting more into power than men. Maybe not to the extent where they are absolutely dominating, but considering how I work at a McDonald's where it's a 90% female ratio, I think I kind of know where I'm going with this. But anyways, aside from that, I think one of the positives of this show is kind of how is the characters themselves, and specifically how dynamic they are. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about this, there are two types of characters in most shows: static characters and dynamic characters. Static characters are usually people that stay the same, and this show does have a couple of those, you know, where it's like, it really doesn't look like Shota changes at all, Luqua doesn't change at all, in that sort of regard. But for a majority of the characters, almost all of them are dynamic, you know. Kobayashi learns to sort of accept that some things are just going to be out of control and to just roll with the chaos. Toru learns to pretty much try to adapt to human society. Kana isn't really that much of a dynamic character unless you count the first, you know, episode that she's introduced as this sort of dynamic. And even Fafnir learns to lighten up once in a while, you know. Just go with the flow and try to interact with people more or less. So, and here's the third part, and there's a reason why I brought this image, is where the way they sort of tell the story, or sort of tell a message, it's like, it kind of seems into it. It's like, you can't really, it's like the way they come up with metaphors is amazing. Like, for example, they end up, in one episode of the anime, they end up going to Comic-Con. Now, for those of you who don't know what Comic-Con is, it's kind of similar to the American version of Comic-Con, except it's a little bit more risque. Well, yeah, it's basically Japanese Comic-Con. That's all you really need to describe. And it's weird how they managed to somehow turn the event of Comic-Con into a metaphor for the relationship between Toru and Kobayashi. And where Toru keeps on asking, why are people coming to this event, even though she doesn't know it, but a lot of people seem to just come here almost every year. It's going to happen every year, and that's the same argument you can say for, you know, any other Comic-Con, whether it's San Diego or New York, or you can say the same thing about Anime Expo, which I've never been to, please subscribe. That way I can get some money to go there or have an excuse to go to Anime Expo. I'm in Texas, alright? I want to go back to California, but that's probably the only reason why I want to go back to California. So, yeah. So in the end, one of the people who Toru asked this is because the guy says that it's because this specific Comic-Con is only going to happen once. And that's a pretty interesting metaphor for the relationship between Toru and Kobayashi, because even though Toru's lifespan will probably go through millennia, by comparison, Kobayashi is only going to be a second in her eternity. So, but yet she's still going to go through with this relationship because she's only going to exist for that brief moment. And I think you can also say that maybe an eclipse would be a better way to describe it, but I think this describes it just as well. Where maybe there will be more Kobayashis down the line, that will be able to fill that gap for her, but there's only going to be one Kobayashi in this specific time, in this specific space. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I really have to say about this show. As for my recommendability, I would put it at a, say, 4.5 out of 5. And the reason being is because there may be a couple of elements that may alienate certain members of the anime community, but overall, I think it really is a good show that almost anyone can enjoy. And honestly, it is going to be one of those anime that people will talk about, so you might as well watch it. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have for this episode. I'm thinking of maybe doing another episode similar to this. And it's probably going to get me in trouble with the FBI, but considering I'm already being looked after by the Texas Rangers, I highly doubt it's going to be that much of a problem. So, yeah, until then, this is me saying, thank you for being smart. Sayonara.